So the neck, looking here at a mid-sagittal section of the head and neck on a plastic model, what we can see firstly, just to orientate ourselves, we've got the nasal cavity here and the oral cavity here. Remember that the nasal cavity ends just here. So where I've got the pointer there, that line running through here, that's the end of the nasal cavity. So once you're off the concave, posteriorly here, you're moving into the nasopharynx. So this part here, behind the soft palate, so posterior to the soft palate here, is the nasopharynx. Now from memory, the structure that you need to know that's in the nasopharynx is the pharyngeal opening of the pharyngotympanic tube, which we can see here. But if there's a pin anywhere around here that's not in there, then the answer is nasopharynx. So nasopharynx in there, it extends down to the inferior extent here of the soft palate at the tip of the uvula there. Then after that, we have the oropharynx, which is from there, the tip of the uvula, down to the superior tip there of the epiglottis. So this region in here, oropharynx. Now in the oropharynx, like with the nasopharynx, there is a structure in there that you do need to know, and that's the palatine tonsil there. So looking at that there, you can see the palatine tonsil here. If there is a pin somewhere in there that's not on the tonsil, then it's oropharynx. Now then from the tip of the epiglottis down to, again, the posterior superior tip of the larynx here, that region is the laryngopharynx. So if it's behind the epiglottis, laryngopharynx. And of course from there, if we were to carry on down here, we would be in the esophagus. So the esophagus is here behind the larynx. And there's too many structures in the larynx to just pin something and call it larynx. So let's have a look at a few of the individual structures there. Firstly, here in blue, we have the epiglottic cartilage. So that's part of the epiglottis there. So all of this is epiglottis here. Then inferior to that, we have the thyroid cartilage. Now, in a mid-sagittal section, that's really all you can see. If we turn the model around a bit to have an anterior point of view, you can see a bit more of the thyroid cartilage there. But you don't get to see too much of it. It's then covered by muscles. In between the thyroid cartilage and the hyoid bone, we have the aptly named thyrohyoid membrane. So you can see part of that just there. And again, from a mid-sagittal point of view, you can see the hyoid bone here, you can see the thyrohyoid membrane here, and then the thyroid cartilage below it there. Now remember, the thyroid cartilage is not a complete ring, so it doesn't come right around to the back, so we can't see it posteriorly here. So on a mid-sagittal view, that's all you can see of the thyroid cartilage. The other one that we can see that is a complete ring though, is the cricoid cartilage, which is here at the front. It's quite short anteriorly. It's quite tall posteriorly. It gets taller at the back. So that's the cricoid cartilage there, posterior larynx, and here, anterior larynx. Now within the larynx itself, there are a few structures here that we can see. The first one, if we're coming from the top, the most superior one, is the vestibular fold. So that's the vestibular fold. Then inferior to that, there's a little space called the ventricle. Inferior to that, we have the vocal fold. Now the vocal fold is a bit more medial than the vestibular fold. So if we turn the model up like this, you can see that the vocal fold protrudes more medially into the middle of towards the middle of the larynx there than the vestibular fold does. So all of this is the internal aspect of the larynx here. And then once we get past the bottom of the cricoid cartilage though, then we're in to the trachea. So this would be trachea just here, and on the anterior aspect there are two little blue bits here that are the first two C-shaped cartilages. Now you can only see that part of them here on this model from a mid-sagittal point of view. Now they're C-shaped, so like the thyroid cartilage, they don't go all the way around to the midline at the back. So if we're looking at the posterior aspect of the trachea here, what we're seeing is the trachealis muscle. So posterior on the trachea here is the trachealis muscle, and it's just inferior to that tall part of the cricoid cartilage there. So that's what we can see from in the neck from the mid-sagittal point of view. But there's a few structures. If we turn this specimen around to look firstly from an anterior point of view, there's a few structures here that we can see. Actually, we'll come around a bit more lateral because then we'll get a better look. So what we've got here, 4 muscles, and it spells TOS is the acronym you want. So it goes T-O-S, there's another, just a little bit here, S. So it's so starting from the lateral side, it's thyrohyoid. So that's coming from the thyroid cartilage up to the hyoid bone. Then we have omohyoid, which comes from the hyoid bone, goes all the way down to the scapula, actually has 2 bellies. Here we're just seeing the superior one, but that's omohyoid. Then we have sternohyoid, and predictably that attaches to the sternum and the hyoid bone. So it's relatively long. And then we can just catch the medial edge here of the sternothyroid. It's not a really great view of it, but that's just part of the sternothyroid there. And predictably it comes from the sternum and travels up to the thyroid cartilage. So we have thyrohyoid, omohyoid, sternohyoid, and then sternothyroid. So T-O-S-S, or TOS, is the acronym. Now, and these will be clearly visible on other models and specimens as well. Now here, of course, we have the sternocleidomastoid being fairly superficial there. On the outside, on the external surface of the sternocleidomastoid, is the external jugular vein. So that we can see here externally. If you're looking at a specimen or model, you can see a vein and it's external to sternocleidomastoid. It must be the external jugular. If you're looking at a specimen or model and the sternocleidomastoid has been either reflected, just pulled out of the way, or removed, then the vein you're looking at will be the internal jugular. Now it is visible just here, but only just. There are other models and specimens where you can see it much more clearly. And that, the internal jugular, will be much larger in diameter than the external, and it will be travelling with the common carotid artery and the vagus nerve. And on this model we can just also make out the scalene muscles, but there's really not much of them here to see. So I wouldn't be suggesting that you look for them, especially on this model, but we can just see anterior, middle, posterior scalene muscles there. But there are other ones that are much clearer.